You spend years with a TV show. You laugh with these characters. You quote them at dinner. You cancel plans because the finale is tonight and nothing is more important. And then the ending hits and something feels just a little bit off. Not wrong exactly, just different. Like someone quietly swapped the last page of your favorite book at the very last second. That is exactly what happened to some of the most beloved sitcom send-offs in TV history. Endings that were completely rewritten at the 11th hour. And most of us never even knew it. Number 11. Is Family Ties, 1989. There are shows that go out swinging, and then there are shows that go out quietly, tidying up their loose ends like someone straightening the throw pillows before guests arrive. Family Ties, which ran for 7 seasons from 1982 to 1989, was one of the defining sitcoms of the Reagan era. The Keaton household, with ex-hippie parents Stephen and Elise, and their sharp-tongued young Republican son Alex, played by a never-more charming Michael J. Fox, was appointment television for most of the decade. Funny, warm, and just sharp enough to make you feel like it was about something. But by the time the show was wrapping up in 1989, the creative engine was running on fumes. Michael J. Fox had one foot firmly planted in his film career. The writers were juggling a shrinking cast and a network that wanted a finale worthy of 7 seasons of Thursday night loyalty. The original plan was to send Alex off to Wall Street in a big splashy 2-part episode loaded with callbacks to earlier seasons and a proper farewell to every major character. Scripts were written, scenes were scheduled. Everyone seemed to know what the last night in the Keaton house was going to look like. Then Fox's film commitments tightened the production timeline, and suddenly the elaborate send-off collapsed like a souffle. Someone opened the oven on too early. Scenes were cut, storylines were compressed, and what aired was a noticeably quieter goodbye than anyone originally planned. Alex heads to New York for a job opportunity. The family shares a moment around the kitchen table, and that is more or less that. No big speech, no grand gesture, no moment that felt proportional to 7 years of television. The most quietly devastating part. Viewers filled in the gaps themselves. Because Fox was so beloved, audiences projected the emotional weight the finale did not actually have. Nobody noticed the seams because they were too busy feeling nostalgic, which honestly is either a tribute to the audience or a very lucky break for the writing staff, possibly both. Scott Valentine's Nick Moore disappearing without explanation, which we have covered on this channel before, was just one of the casualties of a show that ran out of runway a little faster than it expected. Number 10. Growing Pains, 1992. Growing Pains was the Long Island family sitcom that ran from 1985 to 1992 on ABC. And for most of that run, it was exactly what you expected. Jason Seaver, the psychiatrist dad played by Alan Thicke, working from home, so his journalist wife Maggie, played by Joanna Kearns, could pursue her career. Their kids, including teen idol Mike Seaver, played by Kirk Cameron, keeping the show's ratings afloat on the shoulders of his magnificent hair and goofy charm. It worked. For a while, it really worked. But by the final season, things had shifted significantly behind the scenes. Cameron had become a born-again Christian in 1987, and his growing religious convictions began influencing the direction of the show in ways that made production increasingly complicated. He objected to storylines he felt contradicted his faith, and he pushed for the show to reflect more explicitly Christian values. Writers began navigating around his concerns mid-production, revising scripts sometimes days or even hours before filming. This was not rumor. This was the new normal on the Growing Pains set. The original series finale was planned as a straightforward family send-off. The Seavers were going to move to Washington, D.C. for Maggie's new job. The kids would scatter to their respective futures, and the show would close the door on a loving, slightly chaotic family that had shared a decade of Thursday nights with America. Clean, warm, and proportional to what the show had been. What actually aired included a last-minute pivot toward a more overtly faith-centered message, with storylines adjusted to reflect Cameron's influence over the final stretch of production. Several originally scripted scenes were reworked. Dialogue was changed. The ending that aired was not the ending that had been planned even a few weeks earlier. And here is the wildest footnote to this story. A young Leonardo DiCaprio had joined the cast that final season as Luke Brower, a homeless teen taken in by the Seavers. The kid was extraordinary, raw, grounded, and clearly built for something much bigger than a sitcom in its final season. His performance got noticed. Hollywood came calling. And Luke Brower, like the finale itself, ended up being something entirely different than what anyone originally planned. Leo, it turns out, did just fine. Number 9. Coach, 1997. Here is a name you probably have not thought about in a while. Coach, the ABC sitcom that ran for 9 seasons from 1989 to 1997, following Hayden Fox, the lovably clueless football coach of a fictional Minnesota college team played by Craig T. Nelson. It was a show about sports, but not really about sports. It was about the characters. Hayden's long-suffering assistant Luther, played by Jerry Van Dyke, his equally clueless buddy Dauber, played by Bill Fagerbacke, and his daughter Kelly, played by Claire Carey. It was comfortable, funny, and genuinely easy to love. Coach had been winding down gracefully, and the producers had an ending in mind. Hayden was going to get his big break, coaching an NFL expansion team in Orlando, bringing together nearly a decade's worth of character development into a proper send-off. Scripts were drafted. The production team was building towards something. The finale was going to be the culmination of everything. Then ABC pulled the plug with almost no warning. The network had been evaluating the show's declining ratings and made the decision to cancel it, while production on what would become the finale was still actively being shaped. Writers were told mid-process that this was the last episode. Full stop. The ending they had been building toward had to be completely compressed and restructured overnight to function as a series finale rather than a season cliffhanger. Storylines that were supposed to breathe across future episodes were jammed into a single hour. What aired was still effective. Nelson brought enough genuine warmth to the material that most viewers went along for the ride. But if you watch carefully, the pacing felt rushed, in a way the show never usually was. Like someone trying to pack a week's worth of clothes into a carry-on bag. Everything technically fit, but nothing was quite how it was supposed to be. Craig T. Nelson later reflected that the sudden ending denied the cast and crew the chance to say goodbye to a show they had given nearly a decade of their lives to. That is not a footnote, that is a real loss. Number 8. Married with Children, 1997. Fox's proudly shameless working-class sitcom, Married with Children, ran for 11 seasons from 1987 to 1997, which is frankly remarkable for a show whose entire premise was built around making everyone on screen as miserable as possible. Al Bundy, shoe salesman and documented American anti-hero played by Ed O'Neill, spent more than a decade losing to the universe in spectacular fashion. Peg, played by Katie Sagal, was delightfully useless. Kelly, played by Christina Applegate, was cheerfully vacant. And Bud, played by David Faustino, was just sad enough to be endearing. Together, they were the anti-Brady bunch, and America loved every second of it. Here is the thing about the Married with Children finale that most people do not know. There was not supposed to be one, at least not the one that aired. Fox did not officially cancel the show. The network had actually been in conversations about renewing it for a 12th season. The producers were not in finale mode. The cast was not in finale mode. Nobody was in finale mode. When it became clear that the show was ending, the episode that became the series finale, a fairly standard installment where the Bundy's Vacation in the Dells had already been filmed as a regular mid-season episode. It was retrofitted as a finale after the fact. There was no dramatic send-off. No final moment of Al sitting in his beloved chair. No acknowledgement that this was goodbye. Fox simply stopped ordering episodes and the lights went out. The cast reportedly found out the show was ending the way a lot of viewers did. Through the press, O'Neill has described it as one of the more abrupt professional endings of his career. No phone call, no conversation, no room to even consider whether a proper finale could be written. After 11 years and 259 episodes, the Bundy family simply vanished into the Fox schedule like smoke, which is almost too perfect for a show that spent its entire run celebrating the art of undignified surrender. Even the ending was a defeat. Al Bundy would have appreciated that. Number 7. Aleph, 1990. Some finales are rewritten because the network changes its mind. Some are rewritten because a star leaves. And some are rewritten because a show gets canceled so abruptly that the people making it do not even have time to write a proper ending at all. The last category belongs entirely to ALF. ALF premiered on NBC in 1986, and it was exactly as strange as it sounds. a wisecracking extraterrestrial named Gordon Shumway, who preferred to go by ALF, short for alien life form, crash lands into the garage of the Tanner family in suburban California and more or less never leaves. The puppet, operated and voiced by Paul Fusco, was genuinely funny in a dry, self-aware way that felt ahead of its time. Kids loved it, parents tolerated it, and NBC wrote it to respectable ratings for 4 seasons. The 4th season finale, which aired in March of 1990, was never intended to be a finale. The episode ended on a cliffhanger, ALF finally within reach of reuniting with other survivors from his home planet Melmac, is surrounded by government agents from the Walian task force just seconds before the rescue ship can take him away. The screen cuts to black. The audience is left breathless. And then NBC canceled the show, just like that. The cliffhanger that was supposed to be resolved in a 5th season premiere became, without warning, the last image anyone ever saw of ALF. Fusco and the producers were blindsided. There was no network courtesy call, no conversation about whether a wrap-up movie or a resolution episode could be produced. The show simply ended mid-story, with its main character surrounded by government agents on an empty highway in the middle of the night. It took 8 years for any kind of resolution to materialize. A 1996 TV movie titled Project ALF picked up the story, but without the Tanner family, without the emotional context that made the original work, and honestly, without much of what made anyone care in the first place. Fusco has been vocal over the years about how painful the original cancellation was. 4 seasons, 99 episodes, and no ending. Just a cliffhanger that NBC left hanging forever. If you were a kid in 1990 watching that finale and thinking you would find out what happened next week, we are sorry. We really are. Number 6. Designing Women, 1993. Designing Women was one of the sharpest sitcoms of the late 1980s and early 90s. 4 outspoken women running an interior design firm in Atlanta, delivering dialogue so pointed you could use it to cut glass. Dixie Carter, Delta Burke, Annie Potts, and Meshack Taylor made the Sugarbaker design firm feel like the most interesting room in any building it occupied. Creator Linda Bloodworth Thomason wrote the show with a voice that was unmistakably hers and unmistakably Southern, which is to say warm and devastating in equal measure. But by the time the show reached its final season in 1992 to 1993, it was a fundamentally different show than the one that had launched in 1986. Delta Burke had been fired after a spectacular behind-the-scenes falling out, which we have covered on this channel before. Jean Smart had departed at the start of season 6. 2 replacement characters had come and gone, and the version of the show that limped into its final season looked almost nothing like its original lineup. The finale that aired was not the finale that had been planned at the start of the season. As CBS signaled that the show was being canceled, the writing staff had to completely reshape the ending arc on short notice. The original plan involved a more elaborate farewell for the remaining original cast members, particularly Annie Potts, whose character, Mary Jo Shively, had been with the show since day one. What aired was serviceable, but noticeably compressed, with storylines that felt like they were trying to do 3 episodes of work in one. Here is the particular sting of this one. Potts and Meshack Taylor both deserved a proper goodbye. They had stayed loyal through cast upheavals, network interference, and the slow erosion of everything that had made the show work. The finale they got was not the finale they earned, like being handed a participation trophy after running the whole race. Some of the magic was still there in those final episodes, but Designing Women at its peak was a 10. The ending they were given was a solid 6, and the difference was timing and network indifference, which is honestly the story of too many great shows. Number 5, Roseanne, 1997. Few shows in television history took bigger swings than Roseanne. From 1988 to 1997, Roseanne Barr's blue-collar comedy about the Connor family in Lanford, Illinois was genuinely, sometimes uncomfortably real in a way most sitcoms never dared to be. Dan Connor, played by John Goodman, was one of the best TV dads of his era. Roseanne was alternately hilarious and heartbreaking, and for most of its 9-season run, it earned every one of those feelings. And then came the final season, the one where the Connors won the lottery. Now, here is what you need to know. The lottery storyline was not always the plan for Roseanne's endgame. The show had been exploring more grounded, realistic territory for years. Dark storylines about financial pressure, health scares, and the honest weight of working-class life. The final season pivot to lottery winnings, European travel, and surreal plotlines felt like a whiplash so severe it gave the audience neck injuries. What fewer people know is how dramatically the actual finale itself was rewritten. The ending that aired revealed, through Roseanne's narration, that most of the later seasons had been a book she was writing, a fantasy she constructed after Dan's real death from the heart attack earlier in the season. It reframed everything. It retroactively changed the entire meaning of what viewers had watched. Dan was dead. Jackie was actually the one who was gay. The characters the audience had spent years with were revealed to have been, in some cases, fictional composites. This ending was not in the original scripts. It was not the plan at the start of the final season, or even partway through it. It was added late, written as the season was already in production, as Barr made the decision to use the finale as something closer to a personal artistic statement than a traditional sitcom wrap-up. The result divided audiences so sharply that the finale is still being argued about today. Some people find it genuinely moving, others feel genuinely cheated, but almost everyone agrees they had no idea that ending was coming, because it was written that way, almost overnight, relative to the rest of the season's planning. Dan Connor deserved better, and honestly, so did John Goodman. Number 4, Quantum Leap, 1993. If there is a Mount Rushmore of television finales that broke their audience's hearts through sheer chaos and apparent indifference, Quantum Leap is on it. The show, which ran on NBC from 1989 to 1993, followed Dr. Sam Beckett, played by Scott Bakula, a physicist who becomes trapped in a time travel experiment that sends him leaping through history, inhabiting other people's bodies and trying to right historical wrongs before leaping again. His only contact was the holographic image of his best friend Al, played by Dean Stockwell, who guided him from the future with a combination of genuine warmth and cigar smoke. It was one of the most emotionally generous shows of its era, the kind of show that could make you cry about a person whose name you did not know 10 minutes earlier. Bakula and Stockwell had chemistry that felt earned over 5 seasons. Viewers wanted Sam to find his way home. That was the whole emotional promise of the series. The original plan for the finale involved Sam finally leaping home. Scripts existed. Conversations had taken place. The emotional payoff the audience had been waiting for was on the table. Then, NBC canceled the show mid-production on the final season. What aired instead was a devastating, confusing episode called Mirror Image that set Sam in a mysterious bar on the day of his birth. Surrounded by people who may or may not be symbolic representations of the people in his life, Sam learns, through a series of increasingly cryptic conversations, that he has always had the power to go home and simply has not. And then he chooses not to leap home. And then a title card appears on screen, informing the audience that Sam Beckett never returned home. A title card for one of the most emotionally invested audiences in network television. Bakula and Stockwell were reportedly blindsided by the ending. Stockwell has been candid over the years about how painful it was. The finale as it aired was not what had been planned, not what the writers wanted, not what the cast had been told was coming, and not what 5 years of storytelling had promised the audience. It remains to this day one of the most jarring examples of a network pulling the rug out from under a beloved show and leaving everyone sitting on the floor wondering what just happened. Number 3, Perfect Strangers, 1993. Perfect Strangers, which ran on ABC from 1986 to 1993, was one of the warm, reliable workhorses of the TGIF lineup. Balki Bartokomous, the wide-eyed immigrant cousin from the fictional Mediterranean island of Mypos, played by Bronson Pinchot, moves to Chicago and proceeds to learn about American culture alongside his perpetually nervous cousin, Larry Appleton, played by Mark Lynn Baker. Their physical comedy, their genuine affection for each other, and Pinchot's extraordinary commitment to the role made the show a consistent pleasure for 7 seasons. By the final season, ABC had essentially moved on. The network was reshuffling its Friday night lineup, and Perfect Strangers was being quietly phased out. The problem was that nobody told the production team with enough notice to actually plan a proper finale. The original intentions for the show's ending involved a significant moment for Balki, the character who had driven the whole series. After 7 years of American adventures, Balky's arc was supposed to include something that honored where he had come from and where he had arrived. The writers had ideas. The cast was invested in getting it right. What happened instead was that the timeline compressed dramatically as the cancellation became official. The finale that aired was a warm but noticeably rushed episode that wrapped up the major character relationships without the room to breathe that 7 years of audience investment genuinely warranted. Balky and Larry and their respective wives, Mary Ann and Jennifer, said their goodbyes in an episode that felt like it had been written considerably faster than the show deserved. Pinchot has spoken warmly about the show in retrospect, and Lynn Baker remains grateful for it. But the gap between what the finale could have been with proper planning and what it actually became due to network timing is real and measurable if you know what to look for. The dance of joy that Balky and Larry performed in virtually every episode deserved a final curtain call, built on more than a few weeks' notice. They did not get that, but they gave us everything they had anyway. Number 2, Newhart, 1990. Here is the thing about the Newhart finale. Everybody knows the punchline. If you are of a certain age, you know exactly what happened in the final minutes of that last episode. Bob Hartley wakes up in bed next to his wife from the Bob Newhart Show, played by Suzanne Pleshette, revealing that the entire 8-season run of Newhart had been a dream. It is widely considered one of the greatest series finales in television history, a comedy punchline that also functions as genuine television magic. What most people do not know is how that ending came to exist, and how close it came to being something else entirely. Newhart had run from 1982 to 1990 on CBS, following Bob Hartley, now an innkeeper in Vermont, navigating the eccentric residents of his small town. The show found its rhythm through the wonderful weirdness of its supporting cast, particularly the three brothers Larry, Daryl, and Daryl. The dream sequence ending was the idea of Bob Newhart's wife, Ginny. She suggested it over dinner one night, and Newhart brought it to the production team. The idea was embraced immediately, and more importantly, it was kept almost completely secret throughout the production of the final episode. But here is where the rewriting comes in. Even after the dream sequence concept was locked, the specifics of how the final scene would play out were revised multiple times in the final weeks of production. The dialogue between Bob and Emily was reworked. The transition from the Vermont in-world back to the Chicago apartment from the earlier series was adjusted for both comedic timing and for the emotional landing. The setup involving the Japanese golf resort that sends the entire town into chaos was partly restructured to make the reveal hit harder. Pleshette was brought in secretly and filmed her portion in a single day. Nobody on the regular Newhart cast knew she was involved until it was done. The final script that aired was noticeably different from the earlier drafts, tightened and refined in those last weeks in ways that made the difference between a good finale and a legendary one. The rewriting worked. It absolutely spectacularly worked. This might be the only entry on our entire countdown where the overnight rewrites actually made the ending better than anything they had started with. Number 1, it is Seinfeld, 1998. And here we are, the single most talked about, argued about, debated at dinner parties, and relitigated on the internet sitcom finale in television history. Seinfeld ended on May 14th, 1998, with an audience of 76 million people watching. 76 million. The pressure on that finale was unlike anything a comedy had ever faced. This was the biggest show on television handing over its last hour to the world, and the ending that aired was not the ending that was originally planned. Not even close. Seinfeld creator Jerry Seinfeld and co-creator Larry David, who had famously left the show after season 7 before returning for the finale, had multiple versions of the ending in various stages of development before the final script was locked. The original concept that David brought back with him did not involve a trial at all. The idea of gathering virtually every recurring character from the show's 9-year run and staging a courtroom scene where Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer are put on trial for their moral failures was developed and written under intense secrecy, but it was also revised, restructured, and partially rewritten multiple times in the weeks leading up to production. There were serious internal discussions about whether the trial concept was the right ending at all. Some people in the show's orbit felt strongly that the finale should be smaller, more intimate. A final scene in the diner, a conversation on a street corner, something that honored the show's commitment to smallness and everyday absurdity rather than a large-scale event. Those arguments were made, they were heard, and they were ultimately overruled. Even after the trial structure was committed to, specific scenes were rewritten late. The final moments in the jail cell, where Jerry and George have the same conversation about buttons that they've had in the very first episode of the series, was sharpened and refined right up until filming. The callbacks to previous episodes were adjusted for balance and timing. The parade of returning characters was restructured multiple times because the logistics of getting that many actors back on set required constant script accommodation. The finale that aired was divisive in a way that nobody fully anticipated. Audiences expecting a warm send-off were instead handed a morality play in which the four leads were punished for being exactly who they had always been. Critics were split. Viewers were split. The conversation has never really stopped. What is fascinating in hindsight is that the ending was right. Not comfortable, not warm, not the group hug the audience wanted, but right. A show that spent 9 years insisting its characters were allowed to be selfish, petty, and small could not end by letting them off the hook. The original instinct to go smaller would have been a betrayal of everything Seinfeld actually was. The rewriting, the debate, the pressure, the revision, all of it produced the only ending the show could have honestly given us. Whether you love it or hate it, it was earned. And 76 million people watched every second of it, and that is our countdown. 11 beloved sitcom finales that were rewritten, restructured, compressed, or completely reimagined right before they hit your television screen. Some of those rewrites gave us magic, some gave us heartbreak, and some left audiences staring at a title card on an empty screen, wondering what happened to the ending they were promised. Which one hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments section below because we read every single one. And if this trip down television's most dramatic last-minute moments gave you that nostalgic itch, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss our next deep dive. Until next time, this is Remember When. Thanks for watching, and we will see you then.